So we are going to go ahead and get started. So welcome everybody to another Meetup Live event. I am Emily Triest. I'm the Events Marketing Coordinator. Today we are joined by special guest, Dr. G, a board-certified family physician and change navigation expert. Deborah will be sharing advice for limiting stress during times of transition. She will also unpack research on how the brain reacts to change and make it through life's ups and downs with confidence. So I am quickly going to share a few guidelines and the agenda for today. So your video is not on, it is off, but you can see us, we just can't see you. It is also recorded. There's also a mute courtesy, so your audio will be muted throughout the event, but if you have any questions, just submit them in the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. We'd love to hear what you have to say, and we'll go over the Q&A at the end of the event. And closed captioning is also available. So if you want to turn that on, you can click on the live transcription icon at the bottom of your screen and select your preferences from there. For today's agenda, we're just doing a quick introduction, which is right now, followed by a presentation with Dr. G, and then a quick Q&A session at the end. So I will just let Dr. G come on in, and she can take it away with all her tips on how to turn your stress to resilience. I'm so excited to have you on again.
I really appreciate it, Emily. Thank you, everybody, for making time for this in all of the different time zones that you are. I think that this is something that is so important for everybody because change isn't new, right? We all know change has been happening, but it's really picking up pace, isn't it? I am going to ask you some questions so that instead of making assumptions about the changes that you're struggling with or facing or the stress in your life, you can tell me in a way that I hope feels safe and reasonable to you. So to do that, I'm going to ask you to be a little technologically resilient because I'd like to know what changes you are navigating, but I don't want to ask you to put it in the chat where people can see who said what. And so instead, I'm going to use a tool that you may or may not be familiar with. Would you, on your phone, any device really, the device that you're watching this on or any other device, would you open up a web browser, please? And would you go to the website menti.com? It's MENTI.com. It's there at the top of my slide right now. If you go to MENTI.com, it's going to say, what's the code for your event? That code is also at the top of our screen. And Ashley or Emily, if you could put it in the chat, that would be great also. It's 4306076. Once you do that, you're going to see this question on your screen. What changes are you navigating? And you can type in your answer and everyone can see it without knowing who said what. So I hope that gives you the opportunity to be a little bit transparent without having to risk your anonymity. What changes are you navigating right now? And I'm going to explain one more time how to participate in this. We're going to do this several times, so please leave that window open or the code will stay the same. Menti.com in any web browser, MENTI.com, and then you can put in this code, 4306076. One more time, that code is 4306076. Now let's see, what changes are you navigating? New job, several people, friendships, divorce, empty nest, finances, a new career, job change, family dynamics, house move, new work environment, my firm wanting me to come back to the office, changing production companies with my business, a career change and a major breakup, meeting, dating people, divorce after 30 plus years of marriage, mental health changes, sobriety, thinking about building a family, moving to a new city, potential engagement, career change, loss of coworkers, transition position at my job with new responsibilities, but without clarification of role, authority, or salary, grief and loss, job search, getting out of COVID lockdown, feeling to go back out and resuming daily activities. That's a big change. Beginning of fiscal year always brings so many changes. To become a competitive and innovative educator, retirement, health challenges, parenting, trying to be more financially efficient, finding ways to make money. Divorce, the end of another relationship and a house move, grief over someone's death, wife retiring, stopped with work to finish my studies from September, a few months without income, recovering from a fire in another area of the building where I live, career transition, habits of life, a car wreck, being the mother of a newly teenage daughter, job search, job change, midlife work rebalancing, keeping up with technology, death of a family member. Run an agile transformation at my organization. Apart from the change in the ways of working, it naturally involves a lot of change in terms of roles and current jobs. I'm not reading the ones that we've seen before, but just know other people also are going through divorce and relationship ending and have denesting and new environment and moving back in with parents and health issues and new jobs and starting families. An adult son's cancer diagnosis, becoming more of a leader at work, living alone for the first time, turning 60, reactivating my voice, working from home versus office, growing pains, anxiety, adult son's drug addiction, death of my children's dad. There's so many changes. And I appreciate very much that you didn't only tell me things that people would all kind of agree must be bad or all kind of agree must be good. Because here's the really startling thing for us about change. All change is stressful. The reason that we wanted to talk today about change navigation and not just adversity or difficulty or struggle is because our brains see all change as stressful. Even just the suggestion of a possible change is stressful to our brains for a really important reason. Our brains have a million different functions, but one unifying purpose, and that purpose is to keep us alive. Because we are, good news, currently alive, that means our brains are suspicious of all potential change. Could this be the thing that kills us? New COVID variant, could that be the thing that kills us? Vending machine at work is changing brands. Could that be the thing that kills me? My phone is updating its operating system. Could that be the thing that kills me? Our brain looks at all change and says, wait, could we die? Could this be the thing? Have you, and go ahead and put a yes in the chat for me if you have you ever had the experience of being in the front seat of a car as the driver or the passenger when the driver hits the brake and your seatbelt locks? Go ahead and put yes in the chat if you've had that experience. If you had the experience, driver hits the brakes, your seatbelt locks up. Whether you're the driver or the passenger, has anybody experienced that? Yeah, a lot of people know what I mean. So the car doesn't know or care if the driver hit the brakes because you're avoiding a 4-car collision or because the driver's reaching into the back seat for a sweater. The car just says you hit the brakes when you were going sufficiently fast enough, so we better engage the safety mechanism. Well, our brains do the exact same thing. When we hear that there is a change, our brain has not just one, but 3 reflex reactions to keep us safe. And those 3 reflex reactions are loss, distrust, and discomfort. What do I mean? Well, it means that when your brain hears about any change, some of the scarier ones might make sense to you, like a job loss or a divorce or a health issue in the family, but also the good stuff, like something that you might have been really excited about, like a promotion that you applied for or a big winning a lottery. I'm going to use that one. You've put money in and you gambled and you find out you won. Even while you might be so excited or happy or relieved because you really needed the money, your brain also says, wait, what could we lose? Am I going to lose somebody's respect because they're going to find out I played the lottery? Am I going to lose some of my privacy when my name gets on the news? What could we lose? How could this be dangerous? And then your brain does this next thing. It says, wait, was that really my number? I better check that again. It can't be me who won that, could it? And is it really going to be as much as they said? I heard they take a lot in taxes or the government gets a piece. And was this a good idea? Should I have done this? And then even as you're starting to accept, like this really happened, this was really your number, then your brain says, well, what's going to be uncomfortable about this? Are people going to ask me for things that I don't want to say yes to, but I feel badly saying no? Am I going to is my family going to have expectations of me? Is my job going to treat me differently? Even with what many people might consider a good change, like winning a whole bunch of money, your brain still looks for possible loss. It has distrust and discomfort. Those are the three safety mechanisms that just are our brain trying to protect us. If you are someone who gets frustrated because when there's a change, you feel like you don't handle it well, that you get stuck in loss or distrust or discomfort, I want to say to you, first of all, those reactions are keeping you alive. So don't be too hard on yourself or your brain for putting you through them. And then I want to tell you the good news, which is we're going to spend most of our time together today talking about what the rest of this cycle looks like and how to navigate those three reflexes more easily. Before we do, I'm going to ask you a different question. I said all change was stressful. When you think about that idea of stress, what words or short phrases come to mind? We're going to make a word cloud. If you would come back over to Menti, if you're not there right now, menti.com, menti.com, the code has not changed. It's 4306076. If you left the window open, you won't need to put the code in again. You can put in up to 3 answers. So when you think about stress, what words or short phrases come to mind? Anxiety, panic, sadness, parenting, out of control, finances, work, cry, pain, gritted teeth, exhaustion, opportunity, insomnia, sadness, irritable, tense, burnout, things you can't control, shortness of breath, mental health issues, relationships, emotional pain, tension, possibilities, headache, lack of sleep, uncomfortable. The words you see becoming larger mean that more people have put those exact same words, so they're getting upvoted in our word cloud. Anger, boss. Frustration, bills, unknown. It impacts my body. Introverted, emotional. I will not be able. Abandonment, food cravings. Distress, agile, tears. Okay, the ones that are getting the most votes are really anxiety, overwhelm, fear, panic, pain, tension, insomnia. None of this sounds good, right? I get that. It's really hard. I'm a family physician. I'm a medical doctor here in the US. And I have to tell you that I see the ravages of stress on people's bodies and minds every day that I'm in the hospital or in the clinic. I don't discount that at all. But I would like to say one of the really provocative things that I'm going to say today, and that is we have a belief in our society that stress is poison, and it is not. Stress is not toxic. If I told you, and if you've ever learned with me before, you've heard me say this. If I told you that just walking up one flight of stairs gets me pretty out of breath, but I'm healthy, I'm just not in very good shape, you know what I need to do if I want to be in better shape, right? I need to exercise. If I want to be able to walk up steps without feeling short of breath, I need to walk up more steps. The exact same thing is true of stress and overwhelm. If I want to be able to encounter the stress that change brings into my life and not feel so overwhelmed, it's actually stress and change that will help me get there. Please don't misunderstand. Of course, it can be dangerous. So can exercise. If I decided to try running up, there's a building near my home in the city in which I live that has 60 flights of stairs, and there's a club of people that walk those stairs every morning. So if I decided to do that, getting out of breath walking one flight of stairs, I could really damage myself trying to do all 60 flights the very first time. If I tried to do it while I was injured or had a heart problem, I could die. There's no question that exercise can be deadly and that stress can be deadly. But there's also no question that if I want to get more fit, I have to exercise slowly and with support and the right coaching and hydration and all that to get stronger. And if I want to be able to handle the changes that come at me or that I seek because I apply for the new job or I start the new relationship or I want to start a family or I invite my aging parent to live with me, whatever it is, I have to get stronger so I'm not so overwhelmed by that. There's this thing, and this is about as sciencey as I'm going to get, but there's this thing that the body has called a physiologic range. A physiologic range means that we can handle from a very little to a very lot of a lot of things, but it's possible to get outside that range. Here's an example that you're probably familiar with, and that's water. If I drink too little water for too long, I can become dehydrated and I can die. You may or may not know that if I drink too much water, and we're talking liters and liters and liters, gallons and gallons of water in a day at one time, I can become overhydrated and die. Our body has a very wide physiologic range for water, from just 30 milliliters or so to lots and lots of liters. Somewhere in there, we can survive. We may feel awful, we may be sick at either end of the spectrum, but we'll live. Get outside that range and we can die. We have a more narrow range called the optimal range, from, and I'll put it in ounces, from 24 ounces to about 64 ounces of water, where our body's really doing its best. And that is true not only of water. That physiologic range is true for sleep. It's true for food. It's true for potassium. It is true for stress. And that physiologic range is true as well. So it won't surprise you if I tell you that if you have way too much stress coming at you from too many different directions or all at once, it can get damaging. You might not have thought about how if you don't have enough stress, not even a little bit, that can be dangerous too. If you've ever taken a small, energetic child to cross a busy street, you've seen this in action. They are not stressed enough about the danger of cars to their own well-being. So they might just dash across the street, and you probably wisely picked them up or held their hand and said, hey, that's dangerous. You can't just run across the street. You stress them out on purpose to save their lives. We have to have a little stress, at least a little stress, or it can be really damaging. But even more interesting than that is that we each have an optimal range of stress where we're getting the most done. We're getting closest to achieving our goals. We're living the life we want. And that takes a little more stress, but not too much. You see, stress is a tool, not a toxin. It is a tool that can break and damage and crack and destroy, but you can't build without it. So we're going to talk about how to navigate the stress in our lives, not how to get rid of all of it. We need it to get the changes we want. Before we talk about how to use that stress, I would be remiss if we didn't talk about the dangers. I think everybody's pretty familiar with the red flags of stress. You know, someone who is dangerously stressed, like I talked about, too many stressors all at once, they might be abusing substances. They might be considering dying on purpose. They might be self-harming. They might be blowing up relationships or walking away from their job even though they need their job. Those are the red flags of overwhelm. What I would like to talk to you about is what happens for most people, not everyone, before those red flags, the yellow flags of stress. And instead of just listing them for you, I'd like to ask you, what yellow flags do you notice in yourself when stress is starting to overwhelm you? Will you come back over to Menti? And this is like that first question where you can put in a longer answer if you would like. You don't have to just put in a word or a short phrase. And I'd like you to tell me, what yellow flags do you notice when stress is starting to overwhelm you? 2 people have answered so far: insomnia, restless, no appetite, crying more often, anger. Somebody said creative avoidance. I like that phrase. I'm going to use that. Sweating, lightheaded, difficulty going to sleep, higher heart rate, lack of care for myself, loss of interest in things. The medical term for that loss of interest in things is anhedonia, the opposite of hedonism. Being short-tempered, poor eating habits, indecisiveness, gripping tighter onto things I can't control, like maybe kids or coworkers, emotional eating, stillness, the cleaning doesn't get done, avoidance, inflammation, chest hurts, anger, quick temper, try to get faster results, tight shoulders, get mean with people, stomach upset, inner tension, irritable, avoidance, tired, running away from life, doing stupid things like locking my keys in the car. I have to tell you, one of my red flags, or one of my yellow flags for when I'm starting to get stressed, is that I lose track of appointments. Usually I can keep my calendar in my head, no problem. And then I realize that I missed a meeting that I just didn't remember I had. And for me, that's a yellow flag. Lacking self-care, turning down invitations from friends. Somebody wrote anhedonia, thank you. No motivation to do something. Can't enjoy anything, focus on the stress, anxiety provoking. Thoughts wake me up at night and then keep me from sleeping. Confusion, overthinking, snapping at people, disconnecting, ruminating, migraines, skin issues, a can't be bothered attitude, mail piles high. That's something you can see, right? Being late for work, exercising to try and reduce stress. That's a pretty healthy coping mechanism, actually. But if you find yourself wanting to exercise too much, then I see how that could be a yellow flag. Overthinking, which leads to confusion, forgetfulness, crying in the washroom, being super active. These are great examples. What I want to say to you is you don't have to memorize all these. You have to think one question to yourself. If you're doing something that surprises you or frustrates you, or if someone else is, try to tie that to getting curious. Is there some stress that's starting to overwhelm here? But it's really useful for you to know what your own yellow flags are, because nobody else can read your mind. So this way you can start to say, hey, wait, I need some help with this stress. And now we're going to talk about what that help can look like. We're going to talk about resilience. Resilience is a word that a lot of people use, I would say, especially in the last few years. And when I ask students, I sometimes work with students, and I ask them to define it, they always say it's the ability to bounce back when something bad happens. And I tell them that is 100% true if you're a rubber band. And then I'll ask some of the younger students, are you a rubber band? And they say, no, we're people. And I say, right. So people don't bounce back from stress because we are changed by every experience we have. The definition that I use for resilience in my research and in my work is the ability to navigate change and come through it the kind of person you're trying to be. So I showed you the first half of this cycle. Change, or the idea of change, comes along and our brains say, wait a minute. What could I lose? I'm not sure I trust this. What's going to make me uncomfortable? As soon as that you remember that you have choices, not listing what the choices are, anything else. As soon as you remember that you have choices, that's a resilient act. It won't keep you from feeling loss and distrust and discomfort. I'm sorry, I wish it would, but it doesn't. But what it does is it turns on the ventromedial prefrontal cortex of your brain, this front part of your brain, and that quiets, it doesn't turn off, but it quiets the amygdala that's thinking about fear, loss, distrust, discomfort. So you turn on this thinking part of your brain up here. The amygdala is right in the middle, so it's harder for me to point to. When you turn this on by just asking yourself, what choices do I have? You will notice that that loss, distrust, discomfort reaction gets a little quieter. It's good that it doesn't turn it off because that does keep us alive, but we need to dim it so we can think. Then you list what choices you have in this situation, like you won the lottery, but you have the choice to not tell anyone. You have the choice to give it all away. You have the choice to ask to remain anonymous. You have choices. You pick one or more of those choices. That's engagement. You're not engaging necessarily with the people who are giving you the lottery money or your community or your family. You're engaging with yourself so that you can have that reunification with the kind of person you mean to be. This is an individual decision because you are trying to navigate change and come through it the kind of person you want to be. That's a good social science definition, but I'd like to ask you, what does resilience look like in people? Will you come back to Menti, please, and tell me, this is going to be a much more fun word cloud than the stress word cloud. When you see someone who is behaving or reacting in a way that you think, oh, that's resilient, what are you seeing? What are they doing or showing or saying? They're brave, adaptable, strong, happy, calm, consistent, easygoing. They keep moving. You see comfort, capacity, positive, strength. They don't dwell on the negative. Perseverance, encouragement, so encouraging others, collaboration. They bounce back quickly. You see self-esteem, comfort, showing strength. They're organized. They don't seem to stress out. They seem rational. They're being courageous. They're active. They smile. They're resolved, outwardly happy. Good. Wisdom. They're self-reflecting. They're in a groove. And the ones that we're seeing come up over and over are calm, confident, resolved, courageous, strength and positivity, and some happiness. Okay. So I got really interested in this idea of resilience when I was about 5 years after I finished my medical training. I'd been a doctor and attending physician for about 5 years, and I thought, okay, resilience is what the medical literature gives credit to for getting people from healing from an illness to actually being well. And I thought, okay, but what is that? I did a great deal of research along with a team at Carnegie Mellon University, which is here where I live, and their School of Business. And we investigated 8 of the most scientifically validated resilience scales. And this is some of the background research I did for my book that's just come out actually a few weeks ago called From Stress to Resilient. We looked at these 8 scales and we figured out among the hundreds of questions in those scales what resilience really is, what they were asking about in those scales. And it turned out 8 skills. 8 skills: building connections, setting boundaries, opening to change and possibilities, managing discomfort, setting goals, identifying options, taking action, and persevering. When we say resilience, the ability to navigate change, it turns out these are the 8 skills we're talking about. So when you are stressed from trying to navigate a whole lot of change, it turns out these are the 8 skills that will serve you. So I'd like to ask you to just investigate for yourself. How competent right now do you feel at each of these? From not at all to it comes very naturally. And remember, this is anonymous. This is really just for you to give yourself a little bit of a pretest before we talk about each of them. How competent do you feel at each of these? Will you come over to Menti and rate yourself right now? This one takes a little while, so I want to give you the time. Good. There's a few more people filling it out. Fantastic. Okay. So I really appreciate that you're taking the time to really think about your current competency. And I'd like to note that on average, people feel like they have some competency in each of these. I'm going to spend just the next 7 or 8 minutes making an argument for how each skill is useful in navigating change. And I want you to think about that first change that I asked you. Remember, my first question was, what changes are you navigating right now? I want you to think about those and how you might use these skills that you already have. My book is about building each of these skills even more, but you have all of these skills to some extent. So I'd like for you to think about that change that you said is really coming up, was top of mind for you, and think about how you might use any of these. You never need to use all of them. I want you to pick the ones that will be most useful to you, given your strengths, your personality, your situation, and the change you're trying to navigate. The first one is about building connections. So how does building connections help you navigate change? Most often, the things that are stressful to us are things that we don't know how to solve, right? Something that has never happened to us before, or that hurts a lot, or that we need other people's help with, something that is new. If you've ever run out of gas, then you know that the first time you run out of gasoline, that's the hardest time, because the next time you run out of gasoline, your frustration level may be higher because this has happened to you before, but you know what you did last time. You know what did work and what didn't work, and you have a better idea of how to approach it this time. The first time we encounter something can be really very difficult. That's not always true. What is always true is that when you have a change to navigate and you are not sure what your choices are or what the best way to go would be, connections are often helpful. This doesn't necessarily mean you need to know 1,000 people. As a matter of fact, in all of our research, what we found is that it wasn't the number of connections that you have, it is a ratio between the number of connections you have and the depth of those connections. How well you know those individuals and how willing you are to ask for help, information, support. Building connections can help you navigate change more easily. Setting boundaries. This is a really hard one for me personally. So you're going to see that look on my face. That's like, oh, why do we have to do this? It's like flossing. But when we set boundaries, it makes it easier for us to navigate change. What's setting boundaries? Setting boundaries is saying what you are responsible for and what you're not, what matches your priorities and what doesn't. My neighbor has chickens, and I don't know my neighbor really well, and the chickens don't seem especially well cared for. They're pretty loud, they're kind of annoying, and a couple of her chickens got out. I had my kids in the house, and somebody from her house came over and knocked on my door and said, "Hey, we lost our chickens. Come outside and help us find them." I couldn't watch my kids and help her find the chickens. That was an easy boundary for me to set. I said, "Hey, I can keep an eye out from here. If you want me to call you, if I see them anywhere, I'm happy to do that, but that's not something I can help you with right now." That wasn't a change I needed to navigate. For chicken lovers, she got the chickens back. Turns out they don't go far, but they sometimes go up. And everything was fine for her. But I can't navigate everybody's emergencies. I have to make sure that my priorities match where I'm putting my energy. So when I can set boundaries and say no to some things, it makes it much easier for me to navigate the changes that I need or want to say yes to. Opening to change. When you have something in mind that is exactly how you want it to go, it's going to be perfect. Let's say you've had a really stressful week and you're thinking of getting takeaway, you're thinking of getting takeout food for the weekend. You know, you're going to, if I can make it to Friday night, I'm going to order from the restaurant that's near my home and I'm going to go there and grab it and bring it home. And you're finishing up with work on Friday and you think, "Oh, I'm going to call and make sure it's ready so that as soon as I'm done, and I'm going to put the drink I want on the counter and I'm going to just be ready to have that." And so you call the restaurant and they say, "Oh, so sorry, we don't have that available tonight, that food." You might be crushed, right? If that dinner is the only way you can picture transitioning from work week to weekend mindset, to letting off steam, to really feeling cared for, then that could be a change that becomes very hard for you to navigate. If you can open to different possibilities as also having good outcomes, potentially, that makes it easier to navigate the change. If you can think to yourself, "Okay, I also like this other thing they have," or "I'm going to hang up with these people and order from a different place and get a meal I really like from there." The more possibilities you're open to as potentially having positive outcomes, the easier it gets to navigate change. Managing discomfort. If I could wish everyone in the world one of these skills, just wave my magic wand, it would be this one. Because in that cycle I showed you, people don't usually get stuck in loss or distrust. They get stuck in discomfort. They freeze or they run away or they fight because they don't know how to handle being uncomfortable. But uncomfortable it's where we grow. So if there are changes that you're navigating because you want to further your education or do something new in business or have a new relationship or add to your family in any way, get a new pet, you're going to be uncomfortable some of the time. If you don't know how to manage that discomfort without going again and again to negative coping mechanisms, that's going to damage you. You're not going to be able to navigate change and come through it the healthy kind of person you want to be. Setting goals. This one's pretty clear, I think. Resilience is the ability to navigate change and come through it the kind of person you want to be. So you have to have a goal of the kind of person you want to be. Not necessarily who you want to be in 5 years or even 5 weeks, but the kind of person you mean to be today. Finding options. What most people do when they have a choice to make is they go with the first thing that they think of. And I understand why. But sometimes that first thing you think of doesn't work. And other times it's not even the best option. Every language teacher I ever had told me editing is important, that your rough draft isn't as good as your final draft. Because when you look for more ways to say something or explain what you're doing or approach a struggle, you're likely to think of something that's even better than the first thing you thought of. And if the first thing you try doesn't work, you'll already know something else that you might try. So finding options, not just one option, but more than one option, helps people navigate change more easily. Take action. This might sound obvious, but many people struggle. They get stuck in option overload, analysis paralysis. You have to have the skill of trying something and seeing how it goes, or you can get stuck in looking at that list of choices and not doing anything and never get through navigating that change. Persevere. The ability to persevere is something that we talk about a lot. We encourage people to persevere a lot, but we never tell them how. Think about it. When somebody wants you to try again, what they usually say is, let me tell you a story about Albert Einstein or Michael Jackson or, Michael Jordan or the guy who invented the Dyson vacuum cleaner. We tell stories of people who failed and failed and failed and persevered and finally succeeded. But we never tell people how to persevere. I got really interested in this topic because I came up against this conundrum. We tell young children, if at first you don't succeed, try again. We tell adults doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results is insanity. And so I thought, how do those two things coincide? Where does perseverance land? And I realized, here's the answer. Perseverance is trying again, but it's changing something. Could be something small, could be the day of the week that you do it, or the color of whatever it is, but you have to make a change, or you are just doing the same thing over and over and over again. Persevering is trying again, but changing something. So now, would you please think about that change that you told me at the very beginning was really top of mind for you, and tell me up to 3 of these. Would any of these be valuable to you in navigating that change? I love it when they all get votes because they're like my kids, like, oh, they like all of them. So great. Okay. So each of these skills are valuable at different times. And you may say, gosh, boy, that, setting boundaries doesn't really apply to my issue at all. There'll be some other change that you have to navigate where it might, but right now that's not a useful skill for you. So don't focus on that one. Thinking about which 1 or 2 or 3 skills you can really bring to bear will really help you navigate the change that's top of mind for you with less stress, where you can feel less overwhelmed. Resilience isn't a character trait that you're born with. It's not like eye color. It's a series of actions that any of us can take at any point. if you would like the slides that we created together, not the whole slide deck, but the slides that we created together, and, oh, I'm sorry, my light went out. And if you would like to get the resilience cycle that I showed you and a little video to explain how to use it and those kinds of things, then if you go over to Menti right now and answer those questions, the results will not show up on the screen. You're going to give me your email address and give me permission to send you an email and things like that. You are absolutely not going to have your email pop up on the screen. As a matter of fact, I'm going to stop sharing my screen here in a moment, and that will not affect your ability to put your information in if you would like to. So if you go over to Menti one more time, only if you want to, and opt in to get the results from what we did together today and my resilience cycle and my video, I'll be happy to send those to you. I'm going to stop sharing so we can get to Q&A, but you can still put in that information if you would like. Hi, Emily.
Hi, I'm back.
Do we have any questions to talk about?
We have a bunch coming in. I just wanted
Terrific.
to say that I think Menti is so cool. I hadn't
Good.
really seen that before, and I like how, like, I feel like stress can be kind of isolating, and I like how it kind of makes people feel more united through. I mean, stress is it can be a good thing, as you're saying, but
But Emily, you're
everybody
onto
goes through it.
something. Normalizing our experiences is actually a really good defense for our mental health. So seeing that other people are going through changes you're going through, that they're struggling with what you're struggling with, but also that they have some of the same skills that you have, all of that can help you feel like, okay, this is more manageable than maybe I thought it was.
Yeah, gives you some confidence. So let's get into Q&A. First we have from Henry, Dr. G, what are your thoughts on life coaches such as myself helping people manage change, life, and stress?
Henry, I think that's what life coaches do. I mean, that's my understanding. I'm not a life coach. I'm not a coach at all, actually, but I think that and I hope that this will be a useful framework for you in your work with your clients. If you can help your clients see that they're not failing by feeling stressed, because our society really does have that message that if you're stressed out, you must be doing something wrong. That's not true.
Let's see. Anonymous asked, wondering if there are any tips on how to build resilience at work versus personal life. The scales are very different for me, whether talking about work life or personal.
Your stress is absolutely different depending on your work life or your personal life, but it turns out all the research shows that the skills that you bring to bear on that are not different. One of the reasons I wrote this book, actually, it's primarily for people who have professional life struggles and family life struggles and all of those things. But I use a lot of work examples because I think that it can feel harder to use tools that we hear about in the work setting. So most of the examples and the exercises in the book are set in the work setting.
Julia asked, do you have any info on how to best manage discomfort during change?
Yeah, Julia, let me tell you an exercise that's actually in my book, but I can just describe it for you and you can do it without the book. Take a piece of paper and turn it sideways and write 3 columns, okay? And in the left-hand column, what I want you to do, and this is only for you, nobody else is going to see it, so be really honest with yourself. Write down all of the things that you do to change how you feel when you don't like how you feel. So it might be that you exercise or listen to music or text somebody or whatever, but it also might be that you drink too much alcohol or you pick a fight with your sibling or whatever it is. List everything you can think of in that left column. And then scratch out the things that are damaging you or someone else. Now, if you have a glass of wine a week and that's not damaging you, you don't have to scratch that out, but be honest with yourself and scratch out the things that are damaging you or someone else. And then copy that list over to the middle. Now what you have are your positive and neutral coping mechanisms. Then in the situation where you're feeling the most stressed, I want you to circle the ones you can do in that setting. Like it might be that, like I had a few years ago, you're feeling your most stressed when you're at a loved one's bedside in the hospital. And so exercise right at that moment isn't a great option, right? It's not something you can do there, even though it's a great positive coping mechanism. Or knitting, maybe your stress is at work and you can't knit while you're at work. So you circle the ones you can do, or you put a little W for work and H for home and F for when you're with your family, whatever it is. And in the right, you make a list of the coping mechanisms that are available to you when you're facing your stress. And then I want you to add to that list. And I have a bunch of suggestions in the book, but I'll just tell you, I want you to listen to podcasts, come to these Meetup Live events, ask people that you respect and admire, read biographies, or check out, there's a bunch of suggestions that celebrities have for how they manage their stress. If there's a celebrity you really admire, add to your list of positive and neutral coping mechanisms, because the longer it is, the easier it will be for you to manage your discomfort.
I love that tip. I think that also makes you so much more self-aware. Like, if you're not aware of how you deal with stress, how are you going to help yourself in those
Right. And it
situations?
will improve all your relationships, because then when you are picking a fight with someone or getting
Mhm.
really irritable, you'll notice it and you'll decide, yep, this is reasonable. I should be irritable right now, or I
Yeah,
could do something different.
yeah. Huh, that's interesting to think about. V asked, how do you stop self-sabotage and turn off all negative responses that were ingrained in me as a child?
I think that that is a really big goal, right? To turn off all of the responses that were ingrained in you as a child. Please take them one at a time. Also, really, and this is not a flip answer at all, therapy is incredibly helpful. If you told me that you broke your leg and you wanted to know how to get back to walking without a limp, I would say physical therapy. And what you're telling me is that you had a lot of negative stuff ingrained in you as a kid, and I believe you. And I'm telling you, psychotherapy or cognitive behavioral therapy are incredibly valuable. And now, because of the pandemic, if you happen to be in the US, covered by most health insurance. And there are a bunch of free resources too. So please get that therapy. And I think it's really useful for you to think about, what's the most obvious thing that I'm doing to sabotage myself that I think is a little bit ridiculous, and maybe get rid of that one first, or the one that's hurting you the most. Focus on that one first, but don't try and don't beat yourself up more for not being able to get rid of everything at once.
Yeah, if they were developed and ingrained in you since you were a child, that's a long time, and you shouldn't
It's a
expect it
long
to
time.
go away in one day.
And I don't know how you could do it all by yourself, because if you could, you would have.
Hmm. Let's see. Anonymous asked, how can we use these skills while dealing with stress caused by another person? Um, Suggest
So,
options to keep your life on course, setting goals, finding ways to
okay.
optimize quality of life.
And in that question, there's a lot of details about a difficult medical diagnosis, and somebody's not really doing, that other person isn't really doing what there is being recommended to help them, and yet you're still in that caretaker role. So you've got a lot of the answer in your question, Anonymous, and that is, you got to think about what is and what is not in your control. This gets really hard in family relationships as well as colleague relationships at work. The closer you are to someone, the more you feel like, but I ought to be able to just make them do what they should do, especially for women. I don't know that this author is a woman, but especially for women, we are told in lots of different ways that we ought to be able to make our partner eat healthy. We ought to be able to make our kids sleep better, use less screen time, all those things. You can make rules for your kids, but you cannot control any other human. Focusing on what you can control, your reaction, your words, how you take care of yourself, how much time and frustration you allow in your life because of that situation. I just, like with the person who asked about their ingrained stuff from childhood, I'm not asking you to solve everything at once, but there are some places that you can set some boundaries. And I think in this case, setting boundaries would be a really useful skill to bring to bear, and building connections. You're not the only caretaker of someone who's really resistant to medical care. I know you're not, unless you happen to be my stepmom, because my stepmom and my dad have gone through this. So you're not the only caretaker to go through this. So building connections with other people, either through a support group or by reaching out to the people you know well and saying, have you been through this, or do you know someone who has? Those could be really useful, resilient skills.
Claudia asked, you spoke about managing difficult situations and being hard and needing to know how best to do this. In your experience as a mother and a doctor, what are your recommendations do you have for parents to get their kids to learn how to do this as well later in life?
Oh, I love this question. Thank you so much for asking it, because you have to let your kids be uncomfortable. It's the worst answer ever, by the way. I have 4 kids. I totally get that. Ton of empathy to any parent who's watching their child struggle. We didn't get to it in in this particular meetup, but and maybe I'll get to come back, but I do a whole talk actually on the 7 cognitive barriers to empathy. Another lie that we have in our society is that if you're a decent person, then expressing empathy comes easily to you. And that is just absolutely not the case. There are these cognitive barriers, and in families, and in small businesses, one of those big barriers is the more enmeshed you are with the person or the outcome of the situation, the harder it is to separate yourself enough to have empathy for what they're going through. Instead, you end up feeling all of it. So because we end up feeling so much with our kids, it's really hard for us to let them be uncomfortable. But what we teach them then is that if they're uncomfortable, they should panic. And that's not true. They need to be uncomfortable and start building their own list of positive and neutral coping mechanisms with your help. And you can be really transparent about that. You can have empathy for their discomfort without fixing it for them. It's hard, but try that.
That's really interesting to think about. I'm not a parent, but I feel like I've definitely noticed when I went to college, like that change kind of happens because their parents aren't there to try and help them through these changes, and you're just
It's true,
forced
but
into
Emily,
it.
how many of them, I mean, in the up until the year 2005, the average number of times that a college student spoke to their parent in the US every week was once.
Wow.
And by 2010, the average number of times that a college student spoke to their parents every week was 13.
Not
So
surprised
parents
with
still
technology.
are trying to manage that discomfort,
Hmm.
and kids are like, cool.
Yeah. I don't want
Not everyone,
it.
not every parent, not every kid, but it is a struggle.
Hmm. Let's see. Anonymous asked, what recommendations do you have for managing discomfort of change? Um, you say we don't get stuck in loss, for example, instead we get stuck in discomfort.
Please don't misunderstand. When someone has lost a person very close to them, they can absolutely get stuck in loss. Grief is, it's not linear, it's not rational, and it is different for every person with every loss. So it is possible, of course, to get stuck in loss. But for the most part, when a change comes along, and I'm going to use one that I know we've all experienced, a new COVID variant, people don't usually get stuck in the loss of, oh, there's a new COVID variant. They can get stuck in distrust. How do I know that any of these restrictions are reasonable? Or how do I know that these restrictions are enough? How do I know who to believe, right? That's become a much bigger issue in the last few years. But they really get stuck in the discomfort of masking or not masking, of going outside or not going outside, of getting a vaccine or not getting a vaccine. Spoiler alert, I'm a doctor. I'm tremendously pro-vax and pro-public health, but it doesn't matter actually what I think. This is a struggle for everyone. I couldn't have been more pro-vax, and the vaccine was offered to me December 24th, 2020, because I'm a physician and we were giving it out at our health clinic, and so we had to get them. And I would have taken it in my eyeball, and yet still, they said, today's the day, and a part of me was like, yes, and a part of me was like, wait, what could I lose? And are we sure this is the right thing to do? And I'm terribly uncomfortable about this. So I remembered that I had choices, and I listed them for myself, and I picked one and I moved forward with it. But even somebody who could not have been more excited or ready or worked harder or prayed more for an end to the pandemic, I still had those brain reflexes of loss and distrust and discomfort. So I've mentioned one of my solutions for moving yourself through discomfort, which is to have lots of positive and neutral coping mechanisms. Another thing that you can do is to turn on that thinking part of your brain by asking, hey, what choices do I have?
This other question comes in, and I think it could be very relatable for some people. She says, I have trouble making choices and become paralyzed with the indecision. Suggestions on taking action.
Right. So one of the things that really gets people stuck with taking action is that they think, what if it's the wrong choice, right? Like, what if it's the wrong action? So one tool that you can use is to ask yourself, okay, like sit down with a friend or a voice recorder or a pen and paper, whatever works for you, and say, okay, what if it's the wrong choice? So my car right now is kind of falling apart, and I've been putting off getting a new one because, first of all, they're expensive, even if it's used. And second of all, supply chain. And third of all, I have 2 more kids I have to teach to drive. The last thing I want is a car that I care about. But my car's really falling apart. And so I'm stuck. I haven't gone to really take action on this. Because what if my kid crashes it? Or what if it's much more expensive right now than it would be if I waited 6 or 12 months? And what if, what if? So ask yourself that what if, and don't stop there. Answer the question. What if it is? What if my child has an accident in the newer car instead of the older car? Then what? What if it's more expensive now than it will be? I find out 12 months later that it would have been cheaper to wait. Like, answer the questions for yourself honestly. And then pick something, because, and this is the real kicker, not taking action is still making a decision.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah, and thinking through that too kind of gives you a reality check, like answering those questions. Like it's not going to be as bad, hopefully, as you think. Like,
Or it absolutely is going to be as bad, and you're like, great, not doing that.
yeah.
That is the worst idea ever.
And then you can rule that out. Anonymous asked, what is something that you can include in your daily routine to manage changes?
There is something that I do with some of the corporations that I work with called a change board, which is to look at what's going on in your life. And some people have a gratitude practice, right? This is just noticing change. To just notice ask yourself the same question I asked you at the beginning. What changes are top of mind? And remember, not only bad things, just change, and write them down, or make a voice memo, put them in your phone, whatever. Just write them down. And then the next day be like, which changes are top of mind for me? And you may notice that they take less or more importance and that they're shuffling, and make sure that those changes are matching your priorities, whatever your priorities are in life.
I just had, oh, here it is. This is going to be our last question. I think it could be relatable again to a lot of people. How do I beat procrastination? To me, it's self-defense attitude. I'm not sure how to handle it. Could you provide advice?
Procrastination is a whole topic in and of itself, but I will give this one suggestion. Often we procrastinate because it's too big a chunk. So buying a new car, new to me, by the way, I'm not getting a new car, I never have, but buying a new to me car is a big task. So what if, and I've been procrastinating it, I mean, legit a year and a half. So what if I put on my list, look for one Consumer Reports article about used cars online? I can do that. It's not buying a car, but it's one step. So the smaller steps you can break something down into, usually your brain can navigate the change of looking at one article. My brain is struggling to navigate the change of having a new car. It is too big a change for me right now. But looking at one article, I can do that.
That is a great tip, and I can actually kind of relate to that. I obviously don't have your experience, but from my own experiences, when I get stressed from like work or when I was in school, I would look at the whole big picture and then break it down, and it makes it easier.
Yeah, it's a really good skill to have.
So I think that's all we have time for today. So thank you so much again, Dr. G, for being here with us and sharing your tips. I'm just going to share a few more slides. So here we have Dr. G's book, Stress to Resilience. I will put the links in the chat. You can find it on her website. So I will send the link to the
I also
book.
wanted to tell you, if you want, I have a free stress tracker on my site. You can go through and get a couple of tips. So that link is on there, and basically it's anonymous. You're going to put in, like, no information gets published anywhere, but you're going to put in a change you're navigating and answer a few questions, and then I'm going to tell you a couple of strategies I think will be helpful to you in your situation. I hope you'll check it out.
I actually just took it earlier to see what it was all about.
Awesome.
I really liked it. It was really helpful.
Fantastic.
And then the next slide is just our new organizer app, which we have developed, and it provides organizers with the tools they need to
super cool.
schedule events. Yeah, it's really cool.
So you can scan the QR code right now. I'm going to do it.
Yep. So right now we have the beta app you can participate in. So you can scan the top code for iOS and the bottom for Android. So I'll give you a second to do that. Okay. And we also launched our podcast, Keep Connected with Meetup CEO last year. So please also take a moment to scan this QR code if you'd like to take a listen. And as a final reminder, you can view a recap of this event in a few days on our Community Matters blog at meetup.com/blog. Thanks again for everyone who joined us. Have a great day.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.